Hello friends, this video on water part 3 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. So now a question that might strike you is, seawater is salty. We all know that. So if you have ever been to a sea beach or a coastal area, you would have seen that the seawater is always salty. It contains a lot of salt in it. But the water from the taps that we receive in our home, that is not. Why? Because just now I said that end of the day, the water that comes out of our taps, that comes from the water in the pipelines, they get it ultimately from the nearby water bodies, and the nearby water bodies get the water from the sea. So in that case, if the seawater is coming to our houses, that should also be salty. But that's not the case. The water that comes out of the taps is not salty. So how does that happen? So here comes the concept of evaporation. So we have already discussed about what evaporation is in one of our previous lessons. But again, we will see it, how exactly evaporation helps us to separate the salt from seawater. So let's see what happens during evaporation of seawater. So when we talk about evaporation, it is about heating a liquid such that it changes to its vapor form. So basically the change of a substance from liquid to vapor, that is called evaporation. So liquid water evaporates to form water vapor. Now just try this out at your home. Let's say you take some water in a pan, heat it. Now as soon as you start heating it, what happens? You see that some vapor is formed. Some of the liquid water starts getting converted to water vapor. So this is called evaporation. Now the similar type of evaporation takes place in case of seawater. Now the seawater contains both salt as well as water. The evaporation will take place only for water because salt is not in liquid form. So water is in liquid form. So in this process, what happens is the liquid water. So right now when you talk about the seawater, so seawater contains salt plus water. This makes the water salty. Now, when the water gets evaporated, this liquid water gets converted to water vapor. What happens to the salt? The salt remains as it is. So basically, the salt and the water get separated. Correct? Okay. The next question would be, okay, so if we say that the salt and the water got separated, the first question is, how evaporation happened, or why evaporation of seawater happened? Because we did not heat the seawater. We do not need to heat it because in presence of sunlight, it is anyways getting enough heat. The sunlight has a lot of heat. So in presence of sunlight, evaporation will anyways take place. So all this happens in presence of sunlight. So that's how you are left out with the salt. So that in fact, this is how salt is obtained from the sea. Because we obtain salt from sea. So you see here, you can see heaps of sand. Heaps of salt. So that's how salt is obtained from sea and the water gets converted to water vapor. So that's how salt and water are separated. Now again, another question. Okay. So the salt and the water got separated because the water which was there in the sea got converted to water vapor. And this water vapor is now present in the air. It is present in the atmosphere. So how is it coming to the taps in our houses? So the water which we are getting in the taps are obtained from the nearby rivers, ponds, lakes, etc. And how water is coming to those rivers, lakes and ponds? So one common way is through rainfall. So what happens is here, whatever water was present, so that water gets converted to water vapor. So that water vapor results in the formation of cloud in the atmosphere. And this cloud later gives rise to rainfall. Now whenever there is rainfall, what happens? The rainwater falls into ponds, rivers, lakes, etc. So now this water which we are talking about, the water in the rain or the water in the ponds and rivers, they do not contain any salt. So from these places the water comes to our taps. So that is why the water in our taps do not contain salt. But oceans are like one of the crucial sources of water which we use in our day-to-day life. So not only in the sea, what evaporation of water can be seen also from other places. So let us look at a few examples. Think of this example where, let's say, while doing something, you are carrying a mug of water and some water spilled over the ground. So you see here water is spilled over the surface. Now let's say you do not do anything, you just leave it like that for the entire day. What happens? By next day you see that the surface dried up. So what happened to the water? So that water evaporated. So that water got converted into water vapor, and that's how the surface became dry. Now in this case, you might say that we did not heat the surface. The surface was inside a room. So maybe it was not under the direct exposure of sunlight. So how did evaporation happen? So well, for evaporation, it is not necessary that the presence of sun or the presence of heat is very important. But yes, even if indirectly heat is present, the process of evaporation becomes faster. So heating fastens the process of evaporation. So that's the concept. Again, you look at another example. Water from the fields. If you look at huge agricultural fields, so there also water from the fields also evaporate. Some small amount of water tends to evaporate. Think of drying clothes under the sun. You wash your clothes, they are wet. They contain a lot of water within them. You just dry them under the sun. What happens? You see, evaporation happens. Now here I'll talk about a very interesting concept. Now have you ever noticed that whenever you want to dry your clothes, how do you dry them? You open let's say you want to dry a sari. So a sari is like a big huge stretch of cloth. So you open it completely and then you spread it on a wire and you leave it under the sun. And it gets dried up very quickly. But instead of doing that, if you would have taken that wet sari, folded it and then kept it under the sun, in that case what would have happened? So when you fold it and keep it, you would have observed that only the upper surface or only the exposed surface becomes dry. The inner surface still remains wet. But when you open the entire sari and then flatten it and keep it on the wire, then that entire thing gets dried up. That's because evaporation takes place from the surface of any object. Now in this case, when you are completely stretching this entire cloth, in that case, the entire surface is being exposed to the heat. So evaporation is taking place from the entire surface. But if you fold it like this, in a crumbled shape and keep it under the sun, so only the upper surface is exposed to the sun. So that inner portions will still remain wet. So that is the concept of evaporation. So evaporation of water always takes place from the surface of that object which contains water. So basically the liquid water on the surface will get converted into vapor. And heating increases the rate of evaporation. So if you provide some heat, evaporation will happen faster. So that's the difference. So let us try this out. So let's try to perform an experiment with regards to evaporation. So here we will see that it is not that evaporation can happen only under the sun. It can happen in both shade as well as sun. The only difference is that under the shade, the process will happen slowly as compared to that under the sun. So basically the process of evaporation will take longer time under the shade. So this is the shade and this is the sun. So you take some water in a bowl and you actually take two bowls, put some water in both of them. Keep one of them directly under the sun and the other one you keep it under the shade so that it does not receive sunlight directly, but yeah, indirectly it receives some amount of heat. So that no direct sunlight is obtained here, and here direct sunlight is obtained. Now what do you observe after some time? You leave it as it is without disturbing it for some time, and after some time you notice that the amount of water in this vessel reduced. Why it reduced? Because that amount of water got converted to water vapor. But in this case, the decrease was not at all noticeable. So that means here evaporation is taking place faster. So here faster evaporation is taking place. Now why did that happen? Because under the sun there is enough heat. There is so much of heat that water changes to vapor very quickly. It is the same way as the water contained in a pan heated on a stove. So there also you see that immediately the water starts getting converted to water vapor. Whereas under the shade, there is no direct heat. Some heat is obtained because the surrounding air is warm during the day. During daytime, anyways, the air everywhere is warmer. So even if you are staying inside your house, let's consider that there is no AC inside your house. So when you stay even inside a room, during the afternoon you feel hotter. That's because the surrounding air is hot during the daytime. So in this case also, it is not exposed to direct heat, but this surrounding air is warm. And due to this warmth of the air, evaporation happens here also, but slowly. Maybe this much decrease which took place here within a couple of hours, this decrease here might take a day. So basically what we understand from this experiment is, it is not necessary that evaporation needs the presence of sun. Evaporation can happen anywhere, but it occurs from the surface of the liquid. In fact, when you talk about the evaporation being a surface phenomenon, you will also notice that if you take water in a dish and if you take water in a beaker, you would notice a difference in the rate of evaporation again. So let's say you have a beaker like this and you put some water in it, like this. And on the other side you have a plate like this and you have put water like this. And the same amount of water in both the things. Just that the shape of the container is different. So evaporation would be faster in this because here the surface is more. So more amount of liquid will get converted into vapor. But in this case the surface is smaller. So less amount of liquid will get converted to vapor. So that's the difference. So we say that evaporation always occurs from the surface of the liquid. And that is why during drying clothes we stretch the clothes and then put it under the sun so that they dry quickly.
Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more educational videos with a better experience. Please do not forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for latest updates. Thank you once again.